Welcome to the deep dive. We're cracking open a stack of sources today, really digging in to pull out those surprising nuggets of knowledge that can genuinely make you better informed.
Exactly. Think of us as your guides, kind of navigating the material so you get the insights without having to sift through everything yourself.
Today, we are diving deep into a topic that has probably caused you, well, at least a little bit of confusion at some point: early dating, and specifically why things often just don't go past that first date.
We've been looking at a really fascinating source here. It's a book based on some extensive research, actually. Interviews with over 1,000 men, specifically asking them why they didn't pursue a second date.
And they didn't just stop there, did they? The research also looks at why women lose interest, and it uses this really interesting technique they call the exit interview,
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty much what it sounds like. Basically asking for candid feedback after a date doesn't work out. What went wrong.
which is the kind of honest post-date review you almost never get, right?
Exactly. And the findings are often, well, incredibly eye-opening.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive: to cut through all the guesswork, the common dating myths, and give you a clearer picture of what might actually be happening based on what people are really saying.
Yeah, we're aiming for those surprising facts, maybe some relatable examples from the interviews themselves, and insights that can help you navigate that sometimes tricky first impression.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So the source kicks off by really setting the stage. It argues that the dating landscape today is quite different than it used to be.
How so? Is it just, apps and swiping and all that?
Well, that's definitely part of it, but it seems more fundamental. People are generally older when they marry. Now the average age has gone up significantly,
Right.
which means singles are coming to the table with more relationship experience, often years, sometimes even decades, of dating history behind them.
Okay, so maybe everyone has a bit more baggage. Is that the idea?
Well, the source doesn't quite put it like that, but it does connect it to the rise of what it calls the self-awareness industry, therapy, self-help books, all the media analysis of relationships.
Ah,
So singles today are often much more articulate about what they want, and maybe more importantly, what they don't want.
and they filter new people through old experiences.
Exactly. Frequently filtering new people through the lens of past disappointments or negative experiences. Projecting, basically.
Yeah, projecting the past onto the present. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. And the result of this whole mix, more experience, more self-analysis, more awareness of potential problems, is that the first date has become, and the source puts this quite dramatically, an unprecedented minefield.
A minefield. Wow, that sounds pretty
It
intense.
kind of is, because the idea is people are making snap judgments faster than ever. And these judgments are often based on very little information, which can lead to, well, faulty conclusions.
Hmm. And the source had that statistic about marriage too, didn't it? Something like over 20% of married people didn't even like their spouse when they first met.
Exactly. I mean, think about that. In today's minefield, how many potentially great connections might be getting cut off after just one date because of a quick, possibly wrong snap judgment?
Yeah, it really puts a ton of pressure on that first meeting. The source even suggests preparing for a first date is almost like prepping for a job interview, like doing homework on the company, the other person, to figure out what they might be looking for, just to avoid stepping on a mime.
Which leads us right into the core of the research this book is based on. They actually asked over 1,000 men why they didn't call a woman back after an early date.
And the sheer number of reasons they got is kind of shocking, isn't it?
It really highlights that minefield idea. They collected something like 4,152 date breakers, specific reasons men didn't pursue a second date. Compare that to only 591 date makers, the positive reasons they did want to see someone again.
Wow. So the focus was clearly on figuring out the pitfalls.
Definitely. And the biggest shocker right out of the gate, what women thought went wrong versus what the men actually said
Oh,
happened.
yeah. What was that number?
A stunning 90% of women guessed incorrectly about why a man didn't call them back.
90%. That's huge.
It is. And what the men cited were often things the women hadn't even considered. Sometimes, seemingly minor things, almost superficial sometimes.
So it's rarely the big stuff the woman might be worrying about.
Often not, apparently. The main takeaway seems to be that in this new dating world, with so many options available, Men are frequently looking for reasons to rule out candidates quickly,
Yeah.
rather than trying to rule in.
Okay, rule out, not rule in. That's a powerful reframing.
And they do this by spotting something, maybe a small thing she says or does, that makes her fit into an unflattering stereotype in their mind.
Okay, so it's less about finding the one on date one and more about avoiding the wrong one based on these stereotypes.
Yeah.
Got it. So let's talk about these stereotypes. What was the number one reason men gave for ruling someone out?
Okay, ranking at number one was the perception of the boss lady.
The dominant, controlling, maybe overly competitive type. Is that it?
Precisely. Men in these interviews described women they might, hire or respect professionally, but they didn't feel attracted to romantically.
Mm.
The dynamic felt tense or competitive, not relaxed.
Can you give an example from the research? Like, how did this actually play out on a date?
Sure. There was one woman who apparently debated really aggressively about not liking curry during dinner, turned a simple food preference into this argument she seemed determined to win.
Oof. Okay.
Or another example, someone who, after they'd coordinated logistics for the date, actually declared, "My plan won," about how they got somewhere.
Yikes. So it's not about actually being a boss, but more about how you handle interactions, that feeling of competition.
Exactly. It's that perceived competitiveness,
Hmm.
or maybe feeling belittled. It's not that they want someone passive or simple, but they want to avoid feeling like they're constantly being tested or maybe neglected in the conversation.
Mhm.
The source included these kind of what's hot versus what's not lists based on the feedback. For the boss lady, hot was things like feminine skirts, while not was professional pantsuits,
Really?
clothing.
According to these interviews, yeah. Also, flirtatious banter versus shop talk. Saying thanks for helping me versus no, do it this way.
That comparison of role models was interesting too, how some men associated a boss lady vibe with people like Hillary Clinton or Rosie O'Donnell as not, while Jada Pinkett Smith or Kate Hudson were seen as hot. Now, obviously, this is just reporting what was in the interview.
Oh, absolutely. We're not endorsing those views at all. It's about the perceived associations these men were making, fair or unfair.
Right.
So the tips here were about focusing on non-aggressive, maybe more playful mannerisms, even during competitive things like games, and considering softer attire choices, maybe longer hair, things like that.
Okay, so avoiding that feeling of competition or tension. What was stereotype number two that men wanted to rule out?
Okay, shifting gears a bit here. Number two was being perceived as the blahs. The blahs. Like, boring. Bland. Really? I feel like we're always told just be yourself, but what if that comes across as boring?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? The examples included things like bland conversation, too much predictable small talk, or maybe going too deep into really niche topics or obscure TV references like Jack on Lost was one example.
Huh.
But it also came across in perceived energy levels and even appearance.
Appearance. How so? Like, not trying hard enough.
Yeah, potentially. Like wearing a very plain sweater and jeans could signal this date is no big deal to me, compared to choosing something with a little more flair, or even negative body language, like that sort of lean back slump that signals disinterest or low energy.
So you could be super intelligent, but still somehow land in the blogs category.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's an example of a woman who did a ton of research on the man's job field, thinking she was showing interest.
Yeah, sounds like a good strategy.
But they ended up spending way too much time talking about his work, which he actually found boring on a date. It wasn't her intelligence that was the issue. It was the perceived lack of energy or excitement about anything else.
Ah, that's a really good distinction. So how do you avoid being the blahs?
Well, the tips include things like showing positive energy early on, maybe a genuine compliment, showing some enthusiasm about the place you're meeting, maybe even telling a good joke if that's your style.
Okay.
And, importantly, pay attention to his cues. If he asks one of those slightly out of the blue questions like, so tell me something you're passionate about, the research suggests your energy might be lagging. It's a moment to kind of pivot and respond with some real gusto.
Right, seize the moment.
Yeah. The hot versus not here was stuff like talking about an interesting book you read versus just discussing the weather, or suggesting an active date like indoor skydiving versus just saying dinner and a movie sounds fine.
Okay, so energy matters. What about stereotype number 3?
All right, ranking #3 overall, but apparently #1 for online dates specifically was the bait and switcher.
Okay, this sounds like misrepresenting yourself, creating false expectations.
Exactly. This can be quite literal, like using misleading photos where someone looks significantly different in person, maybe weight, or features are altered.
The classic profile pic problem.
Right. But it can also be more subtle. like vague statements in an online profile that allow men to build up these unrealistic fantasies in their heads. Exercise regularly might just mean walking to work,
Yeah.
or comfortable in jeans or a ball gown might not actually reflect their real lifestyle.
What's interesting, though, is the source pointed out that men sometimes felt bait and switched, even if the woman technically wasn't lying or misrepresenting herself.
That's such a key point. About a third of the men who cited this date breaker admitted her representation was basically accurate, but his interpretation or his expectation was just wrong. And that number was even higher for online dates.
Wow.
It really highlights that gap between how you present yourself and how it lands, how it's perceived.
So the advice is really about managing those expectations then.
Pretty much. Sell, but don't oversell. Promote your assets honestly, but without building up unrealistic expectations. Be more precise in profiles and conversation, give specific examples.
Like name the book you're reading.
Yeah, or clarify your lifestyle claims, and even managing your matchmakers, asking friends not to oversell you when they're setting you up on a blind date.
Right. Avoid accidental misrepresentation.
Mm.
Got it. What was next on the list of turnoffs?
Okay, next up is the Park Avenue Princess.
The high maintenance, maybe spoiled, money-focused perception.
That's the stereotype, yeah. Examples from the interviews included things like complaining about trivial hard days like, oh, I couldn't get my nails done today, or casually remarking on having a maid.
Or seeming to only think about their own convenience, like choosing a date location that was huge pain for him, requiring a long ferry ride or something.
Exactly. Or that example of feigning back pain to get out of helping a friend move. Little things that just signaled maybe a lack of willingness to be inconvenienced or maybe a sense of entitlement.
And the issue of who pays the bill comes up here too, right?
Oh, definitely. It's a key moment. While the vast majority of men, 84% in this research, expected to pay for the first date, they really wanted to feel appreciated for it.
So not just taken for granted.
Right. A fake purse grab, even just reaching for your wallet to signal thanks, was actually preferred over a blind eye, where the woman just assumes he'll pay without acknowledging it. An expectation that he pays for absolutely everything definitely signaled princess to these guys.
Okay, so the tips are about showing gratitude and maybe not focusing so much on his wallet early on.
Yeah, basically. Stop trying to gauge his financial situation on a first date. It's often inaccurate anyway and can be a real turnoff. Actively show your down-to-earth side, maybe avoid dropping luxury brand names, use relatable examples, and show sincere appreciation for his gestures, not just him picking up the tab, thanking him for choosing a convenient location for you, for instance.
Okay, princess avoided. What was another common one they found?
Then there's the flasher.
Okay, not the literal kind, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
no, thankfully. This is about revealing too much negative personal information, baggage, way too soon.
The classic trauma dumping on date one.
Precisely. Examples included things like discussing therapy sessions or antidepressants in detail, or maybe bonding over shared negative experiences like issues with divorced parents.
And the source suggested this can actually push people away, even if the man has similar issues himself. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right. But the interview suggested it can make men pause and have second thoughts about what they can really handle in a potential partner, even if they can relate to the struggles on some level.
So the tips are basically about keeping it lighter initially.
Pretty much. Keep first dates relatively brief, less time and opportunity for oversharing, and actively avoid that kind of bonding trap, overshared baggage. Save the deep personal history for later, when you've actually built some foundation of trust.
Makes sense.
The hot versus not here was pretty clear. Conversation versus confession, circumspection versus verbal diarrhea, and maybe a fifth date baggage reveal versus a first date one.
Right. Timing is key. Now, moving on, there were a couple related to just general negative attitudes, weren't there?
Yes, exactly. The bitchin' boots and the Debbie Downer.
Okay, bitch and boots sounds pretty intense, like rude, snide, overly cynical.
That's the idea. Like the woman who apparently said, I don't do poverty, when her date's credit card was declined.
Ouch.
Or making broad negative generalizations about guys based on her past bad experiences.
And Debbie Downer is just the classic pessimist.
Yeah, the glass half empty type. Someone who shuts down enthusiasm, like discouraging his exciting business expansion plans by only focusing on the risks. Or maybe just appearing no fun, like refusing to go swimming at the beach with the group and just sitting alone.
So how do you navigate this without being, fake positive all the time?
The source offers a pretty practical tip here. Try the 3.1 ratio. For every negative or sarcastic comment you make, Aim to make 3 positive ones.
Okay, a concrete ratio.
Yeah. While some men might appreciate a bit of edge or intelligence shown through cynicism, the research suggests many are initially drawn to positive, happy energy in someone they're considering as a potential long-term partner.
That makes sense. Nobody wants to feel drained after a first date. What about bringing up past relationships? That's always tricky territory.
Oh, a huge one, and a very common pitfall, according to the research. The X factor.
Just dwelling on exes, talking too much about past bad experiences.
Yeah, it can signal you might not be over them. Or maybe that you're projecting onto this new person. Making statements like, I just know how guys are, can make a man feel like he immediately has to prove he's different from all the previous losers in your past.
Yeah, I guess that's a tough position to put someone in right away.
It really is. And the tips here are quite specific and maybe a bit surprising. One is, never reference the future unless he does first. Things like, when will I see you again? The source literally calls those his lines.
Interesting. So treating those future-oriented questions as exclusively the man's domain early on.
But that's what this research suggested based on the feedback. Another tip, if he asks about your exes, don't immediately turn around and ask about his. Model the behavior you want, basically. That ex talk isn't really first date material.
So don't take the bait if he brings it up.
Right. And if he presses, use what the source calls the one-for-one rule. Share one brief, maybe generic detail, then immediately change the subject back to something present-focused.
Okay, deflect politely. And manage your friends too, right? Don't let them spill your dramatic breakup history when they're setting you up.
Exactly. Setting someone up by saying, oh, maybe this new guy can help her learn to trust again after her horrible ex slept with her sister is, well, it's probably not setting the stage for romance.
Yeah, definitely not. Okay, what's the next stereotype on the list?
Okay. Ranked at hashtag 10 was the one-way street.
Being self-absorbed, not showing enough interest in him.
Yeah, or maybe making the date feel like an interview, but one where you're just gathering data points about him rather than having a real conversation, dominating the conversation, or only considering your own convenience.
Like that example of switching seats because a vent bothered you without really checking if the new seat would then bother him.
Exactly. Or even framing help as a kind of transaction. Okay, I did that for you, now you really owe me one.
Ah, instead of genuine generosity.
Right. Everything feels transactional. The tips here are pretty straightforward, really. Ask questions about him, genuinely listen to the answers, and try to avoid those long, boring, overly detailed stories about logistics or people he doesn't know.
Seems like basic conversational courtesy, but I guess it's easy to forget when you're nervous or trying to impress.
It definitely happens.
Okay.
All right, moving down the list, number 12 is the never ever.
Okay, this sounds pretty absolute, making categorical statements, like hard lines in the sand.
Exactly. Making statements that might limit future possibilities, even if they might not hold true in the long run. Things like, oh, I would never live in a cold climate, or I would never marry someone who already has kids, or I could never date a smoker.
And these can be instant deal breakers, even if everything else seems to be clicking.
The research suggests yes, potentially.
Yeah.
Even if the man is otherwise interested and maybe meets all your other criteria, declaring an absolute like that can immediately shut down his imagination about any possible future with you. He might think, well, that's that then.
But people compromise in real relationships all the time. People change their minds.
Exactly. And the source makes that point strongly, giving counterexamples of happily married couples who ended up doing things they swore they'd never ever do, like giving up a beloved pet cat for an allergic partner,
Right.
or marrying someone outside their religion.
Right.
It just shows that compromise is often necessary. And declaring those hard absolutes way too soon can prematurely close doors that might have otherwise opened later.
Okay, that's a really interesting point about flexibility. What about number 13?
Number 13 is the birds of a feather.
Judging you based on your friends or family, really.
Yes. The perception, fair or not, that the people we choose to spend our time with reflect something about us. Men in the interviews apparently extrapolated negative traits about a woman based on the perceived behavior or comments of her friends or family they happened to meet or hear about early on.
So like guilt by association. If a friend makes a rude comment, it reflects badly on you.
That seems to be the idea, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a quick judgment based on who you associate with.
Okay, and number 14.
Number 14 was the psychobabbler.
Ah, using too much therapy speak. Like, I sense that you feel, or constantly talking about boundaries or calling everyone narcissistic.
Precisely. That excessive use of clinical jargon or therapy speak, especially on a first date.
And men found this irritating, even if they themselves might be in therapy or understand the concepts.
According to the source, yes. They generally found the language kind of off-putting in that context or felt like the date was turning into a therapy session rather than something meant to be fun and light. It's more about the perceived language use in that early dating stage, not necessarily dismissing the underlying issues themselves.
Okay, that's a specific one. And finally, the source mentioned one almost universal date breaker, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Over-drinking.
That one seems maybe less subtle than some of the others.
For sure, it tends to signal a lack of control or potentially implies a hookup goal rather than genuine relationship potential. Plus, you generally need your wits about you to make a good impression and also to accurately assess the other person.
Right, true.
The interviews indicated it was almost always seen as a date breaker.
Okay, so those were the most common reasons men cited for not calling back after a first date. A lot to think about there. But the source also looked at what happens after the first date goes well, right? Because things can still fall apart then, too.
Yes, exactly, the post-date breakers. And coming in at number 2 here, interestingly, is the flame out.
Okay, flame out. This sounds like things get too hot too fast and then just oof.
That's exactly it. The relationship ignites really quickly, but then burns out before it has a chance to build any kind of solid foundation. This often involves premature emotional intimacy, sharing deep personal issues, past traumas, difficult childhood stuff way too soon.
Creating a kind of illusion of intimacy that isn't really there yet, maybe, because you haven't built the trust over time?
Yes, precisely. It feels deep because you're sharing secrets, but the actual trust and connection haven't really been established through shared experiences over time.
Yeah.
And closely related to this is premature sex. The source has this term, doing halfsies, like you get the body without the heart.
Right. And what did the men in the interviews say about that, about early sex?
Well, they reported not really being able to gauge sexual compatibility that early anyway, and they often perceived it as signaling promiscuity, or maybe even that the woman gets bored easily and needs that immediate physical connection.
Mm.
And while they might not turn down sex if it's offered, the interviews strongly suggested it rarely led to a committed relationship afterwards.
Wow, that's a pretty strong finding. And they weren't really buying the, oh, I've never done this before line.
Not according to this research, no. In fact, many men reported actually craving real intimacy and anticipation, and that getting sex easily early on ironically just intensified their craving for something deeper, but not necessarily with a woman who gave it up so quickly.
That's fascinating. And premature decisions are part of this flame out too, right? Not just intimacy.
Yes, big relationship accelerating events happening too soon, like planning an exotic trip together after only 3 dates, or meeting the kids or parents right away, or attending a wedding as a couple very early on.
Yeah, that forces things.
It forces this premature speculation about the future of the relationship, which can cause panic and often leads to the whole thing fizzling out.
So the key tip for avoiding the flame out is basically just control the pace.
Yeah, build the relationship brick by brick, as the source says. Don't feel pressured to match his speed if it feels too fast for you. Slow and steady can win the race here.
Okay, pace yourself. Good advice. What was the number 3 post-date breaker?
Number 3 was the busy bee.
Just schedules getting in the way, life being too hectic.
Pretty much. Too many excuses, too many pre-planned commitments that prevent a timely second date. Ideally, the source suggests, that should happen within about a week to keep momentum going. Basically, it signals a lack of prioritizing dating within a busy life.
The source gets pretty direct here, doesn't it? Saying you really need to prioritize dating if you want it, calling love always a gamble worth taking time for.
It does. And it even mentions the possibly radical choice of, say, paying an airline change fee if you can afford it, just to be available for a promising second or third date, arguing that for the right person, that investment might actually be worth it.
That's a bold take. And related to this whole timing and momentum thing is letting things die because of communication issues, right? Tech problems.
Yeah, electronic miscommunication.
Yeah.
On the one hand, really frequent, intense, early electronic communication, constant texting, emailing, can contribute to that flameout we just talked about by creating unrealistic expectations or a false sense of intimacy.
Right.
But on the other hand, waiting too long to reply to a text or email or call can signal disinterest. And then when you finally do reach out, you get a kind of cold reception because the momentum died.
So it's a balancing act. Too much or too little tech talk can sink things early on.
It seems so. The tips are basically to try and establish healthy communication patterns early on. And, crucially, When in doubt about the tone or intent in a text or email, just pick up the damn phone. Clarify things quickly. So many misunderstandings happen in text that a quick 30-second call could probably fix.
Such good advice. And finally, the source mentioned something called the tailspin, which sounds like when things just don't progress and maybe you can't even figure out why.
Yes, acknowledging that sometimes, even if you feel like you did everything right, followed all the rules, things just don't click romantically for reasons you can't quite control or pin down.
Like that example the source used of the woman who was perceived as a really great friend, smart, easy to talk to, but just not romantically or sensually appealing to the guy, what they called the sensual blahs.
Exactly. It highlights that the feedback, or the reason things don't progress, isn't always about some major flaw you have.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about these subtle, maybe even irrational perceptions, or just a lack of that specific chemistry for that specific person. But the source offers a really reassuring note here, too. Slow starts are okay. Not every great couple had those immediate fireworks or instant certainty. Many successful long-term couples actually started out as friends, or one person wasn't even sure about the other initially.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, those slow starts can absolutely lead to long-term happiness. The book had examples like a couple where he literally fell asleep on the first date, or another who overcame clumsiness, dog poop incidents, and excessive eating on early dates.
Haha, okay, so sparks aren't everything. That's a very good reminder.
Yeah.
And the research also flipped the script and looked at why women lost interest in men, right? Based on polling about 100 women.
Yes, they did. And their top date breaker for men, number one, was the puppy dog.
The puppy dog, like too eager, too nice, maybe appearing desperate or weak.
That was the perception, yeah. Excessive early flattery, being overly transparent about everything right away, or just kind of looking like a sad puppy at the end of the night, hoping for approval. Those were turnoffs. The interviews suggested women often wanted a little more mystery, maybe a bit more edge.
That's interesting, isn't it? Kind of contrasting with the man's desire to avoid tension or competition we talked about earlier.
It is an interesting contrast. And what was number 3 for women turning men down?
Number 3 was the garbage man.
Oh no. Please don't say it's literal.
No. It was about men making lewd, crude, or just overly sexual comments way too early on.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. Examples cited were things like making overtly sexual comments 1 minute into a first date at Starbucks, or calling back after the date just to mention he had a boner, or even flushing the toilet while on the phone with her.
Okay, wow. Those are pretty clear deal breakers. No subtlety there.
Not at all. Women in the research generally preferred sweet, non-threatening compliments much later in the date, if at all, on a first date. Not that kind of stuff. I guess it's good to know the extremes people sometimes hit. The source also had a list of just kind of wild, memorable, random male date breakers from the women's interviews too, didn't it?
Oh, they really did. It was quite a collection. Things like insisting on verifying her eye color by dragging her out into the sun, asking if he could call her ex-husband, wearing a bright purple fanny pack, unironically, cutting all his food into tiny, tiny pieces at the table, really messy pizza eating habits, using way too much slang, telling her she reminded him of his mother,
Oh, classic.
or even picking his nose during the date.
Wow. Okay, that really just drives home the point that the dating world can be incredibly strange and wacky sometimes, doesn't it?
It certainly seems that way.
So we've covered a whole lot of potential date breakers for both sides. But going back to that really startling initial finding that 90% of women incorrectly guessed why a date failed. What's the really big takeaway from all of this research?
I think it absolutely underscores how incredibly difficult it is to truly understand the impression you're actually making on someone else, especially early on, without getting direct, honest feedback, which we rarely do.
Right. And how everything on a first date seems to get magnified somehow. Small actions, little comments, they get extrapolated into these huge conclusions about your whole character, like metaphors for who you are.
Exactly. Everything on a first date becomes a metaphor. That's why that exit interview technique the source talks about, having a neutral friend, maybe, ask ex dates for some candid feedback, can be so incredibly powerful. It gives you an objective performance review, if you like, of your first impression.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about the real you deep down,
Yeah.
but about the perception you created in that very limited time frame.
It's like how a boss might point out a small, unconscious habit you have, like maybe fiddling with a pen during meetings, that distracts from your otherwise great work. It's something you might not even realize you're doing, but it's affecting how you're perceived.
That's a perfect analogy. The examples from the book, like Julia, who came across as argumentative, fitting that boss lady stereotype based on just a few interactions.
Right.
Or Madison, who was seen as a really great friend, but just not romantically or essentially appealing, landing in that sensual blahs category. They show that even really great people can unintentionally project stereotypes or vibes that hinder potential connections, just based on subtle cues.
So what does all this boil down to for you, the listener, as you navigate dating?
Well, I think the main point is that first impressions are incredibly powerful. And they're often based on those subtle cues that feed into common stereotypes that both men and women hold, whether those stereotypes are fair or not.
So understanding these patterns and becoming aware of how you might be perceived, even if it feels totally unfair or not representative of the real you, can be incredibly valuable in those crucial early stages.
Yeah, it's about being aware and then maybe making conscious choices about what you say and do just to ensure your best qualities actually shine through, to encourage that second date where hopefully you could be more fully known and understood.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. If 90% of women are wrong about why a date failed, what other assumptions might you be making about dating, about relationships, maybe even about yourself? That could be holding you back from connecting with someone great.
That's such a crucial point. It really raises an important question for you to think about. How might understanding the power of perception, even accepting that it can sometimes feel unfair, actually change the way you approach your next first date? Something to mull over.